Good morning, everybody. My name is Marcel. This is IrnieracingNEWS Daily Rumble. That is exclusively the full episode on Rumble. And we'll have a little teaser for you guys still on YouTube, and we're trying to convince you to move over.
Studio, Alyssa, this really is the calm before the storm.
Not again, no. Oh.
You know, we're going to go ahead and go to break right now.
Yeah.
It is March 20th, 2023. Right off the bat, I've been following the gold market closely, and last night we hit an all-time high of $2,009 per ounce. That's 2009 US dollars per ounce. Yeah, guys, it hit it up, but that's it. That's like in the AM in Pacific time, 1, 2, 3, 4 AM, whatever it was. And now it's already dropped back down to 1975 as time of recording here, almost 10:30 a.m. So it can fluctuate $30 overnight in the AM, as an example. So before the store is even open. Oh, and for my Canadian friends and fellow peeps, it's now down to $26.99. So we're back into the 2600s. It's dropping fast. Right from, it was a max of 2755, and so yeah, 2700 down into the 2600s. So on the Daily Rumble, we got, so for Monday news, there was an earthquake that killed at least 16 people in Peru and Ecuador. The U.S. Geological Survey reported an earthquake with a magnitude of about 6.8 that was centered just off the Pacific coast, about 50 miles or 80 km south of Guayaquil, Ecuador's second largest city. One of the victims died in Peru, while 14 others died in Ecuador, while authorities also reported that at least 126 people were injured. And on to the banking collapse, the controlled demolition. UBS will buy failed Credit Suisse Bank for $3 billion as the banking crisis spreads. Credit Suisse, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, shares plunged Monday after Swiss authorities cut a deal with its bigger rival UBS to acquire the troubled bank at a marked down price. But European bank stocks and the wider market gained as investors watch whether moves to shore up banks will stem further upheaval in the global banking system. Shares of Credit Suisse, whose woes stem from questions over its internal controls, fell 60% a day after UBS said it would buy the fellow Swiss bank for a lowball price of 3 billion Swiss francs, or 3.25 billion US dollars. The shares are now trading at about the level that they were valued at by the deal. So the trend keeps on going. The smaller banks are being purchased, bought by the big banks. Not just in the U.S. now we have abroad, and essentially so much easier for them to put in their central digital banking money, whatever you want to call it. And it's really ironic too when banks fail and then the government guarantees money to people with accounts. In the U.S. has their system, Canada has the CDIC, and what's actually happening is they just create more digital money, printing more money, but it's not actually printed. It's just, we're going to put money into these banks to pay for the people that lost their money by printing more money, which raises inflation because you're just printing more fake make-believe money. And then you have more inflation, which is causing the whole cycle of the banks to fail. So the banks are failing due to many reasons, but inflation being one of the big ones. And then we're going to print more money to save all the people with their guaranteed money, because the CDIC is not the one putting up the cash. It's the government's just going to print more debt, more interest, and around the circle you go. It doesn't actually help the situation. It's just printing more money, more inflation, more banks fail, and the circle continues. This is too early for me to get into this. So let's go over to Pakistan. Police arrested 61 supporters of former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan and stormed past security gates at his home on Saturday. The former IM was not present at the time. He wasn't at his house. So let's get into the details here. Pakistan police stormed former Prime Minister Imran Khan's residence in the eastern city of Lahore on Saturday and arrested 61 people amid tear gas and clashes between Khan's supporters and police. Senior police officer Sukhuera, who led the operation in an upscale Lahore neighborhood, said police acted to remove barricades erected by members of the Khan's Tehreek-e-Insaf party and his defiant supporters. He said they blocked the lanes around Khan's residence with concrete blocks, felled trees, tents, and parked trucks. Khan was not in the home, having traveled to Islamabad to appear before a judge to face charges he sold gifts while in office and hid his assets. The judge postponed that hearing until March 30th. Well, it's a whole bunch of hard words for me. Well, this is interesting. Sakira said police broke open the main door of Khan's residence and found automatic weapons, Molotov cocktails, iron rods, and batons used in attacks on police during the week. Sukera said that inside the sprawling residence, illegal structures had been erected to shelter people involved in attacks on police that had injured dozens of officers. And more protests in the news. In Israel, Tel Aviv, Israel, Israelis on Saturday took to the streets in protest, now in their 11th week, against plans by Benjamin Netanyahu hardline government to overhaul the country's legal system. The protesters say the proposed changes undermine the country's democracy by restricting the power of the Supreme Court. Netanyahu and his allies say the plan is needed to curb what they claim are excessive powers of unelected judges. Always is, right? The main protest in the central city of Tel Aviv drew tens of thousands of people who waved Israeli flags and traffic sign banners that read "Dead End" and "Risk Ahead." Smaller protests were reported in other parts of the country. So on Wednesday, Netanyahu swiftly rejected a compromise proposal by Israel President Isaac Herzog to resolve the standoff, deepening the crisis over a program that has roiled the country and drawn international criticism. Okay, back to the banks. A coalition of mid-sized U.S. banks asked federal regulators to extend the FDIC, so in Canada it's the CDIC, insurance to all deposits for the next 2 years, arguing the guarantee is needed to avoid a wider run on the banks. Just what I was saying. Let's increase the debt by paying out the money. Like, everybody knows the banks are guaranteeing $100,000 per account per person. You know, like, why are they? And now they're paying out in millions with the recent bank collapses in California, more than they were guaranteed. So if you you're guaranteed $100,000 an account and you have $1 million in account, why is the government increasing the debt, increasing the inflation to pay these millionaires, which is going to make more banks and more inflation and more problems for everybody? And again, good time to move over to gold. Holy smokes, because your value of your money in the bank is just going down and down and down. The value of your buying power of cash is just disappearing. So if you have $3,000 right now, you can go buy a new one-wheel GT. But that same $3,000 in 5 years from now is not going to buy you a one-wheel GT, because a one-wheel GT is going to be $5,000 then. But if you take that $3,000 and you transfer it to, say, a precious metal like gold or silver or platinum, and then in 5 years you pull out that gold and transfer it back to a fiat currency, that new amount, whatever that number is still going to buy you exactly what it bought you today. It's going to buy you a one-wheel GT. So when you put money away into metals, you're essentially maintaining your purchasing power. It's going to be forget about the number. It's going to be the same purchasing power as you put it away today as when you pull it out in 5 years, 10 years, etc. Right? Obviously, short term is more like a little, inconsistent, but that's the whole thing. Your 5-10 year long term. But when you put in your $3K in the bank, when you pull it out as $3K, it's not going to have the same buying power. It's losing so quickly. We're going to have 15% inflation. I'm telling you right now, we're going to have interest rates. You're going to keep going up. They're going to continue to go up through the next 2-3 years. People are going to foreclose on their homes. They've hit trigger rate already, which means people on variable rate fixed payment mortgages have already hit the trigger rate, which means their fixed payment of $3,000 a month is now all interest and gone beyond it. The trigger rate was $3,000. Now they're paying $3,300 in interest, but their fixed payment $3,000. So then their loans are actually extending. So if you're borrowing $500,000, by the end of this year, because you've gone past trigger rate, you actually owe the bank more money now. So you're going to be paying interest on every payment, nothing on your principal. And then now you're actually going to be $20,000 or $25,000 or whatever higher loan. Your loan is going to go from $500,000 to $525,000, and you're going to continue to be paying interest. The bank actually wins. They actually like this, even though they're failing at the same time. They're making more money, more loans, more interest, and around you go. It is absolutely insane. So look for a lot of people can't keep up with their mortgages. There are going to be tons of foreclosures. It's like the banks buying bonds, and when they're failing, they need to sell their bonds at a lower rate than they purchased them from the government. And that means they're taking a huge loss, and then they're asking the government, hey, we just took a $2 billion loss because we had to sell our bonds to fill an influx of cash because everybody's doing a bank run. But we lose $2 billion selling our bonds, and then the government's going to increase the debt to give them that $2 billion, which is then going to increase inflation, which is then going to increase the value of gold, and around in circle we go. So hopefully you guys are picking up a little bit what I'm saying. So back to the headline. Mid-sized U.S. banks ask the FDIC to insure all deposits for 2 years. Let's just increase the debt to give everybody more than we promised in the beginning. It's absolutely ridiculous. Let the banks fail if they're going to fail. If you continue to bail them out, we continue to increase the debt. We continue to increase inflation. And around in circles we go. More banks fail. It's such bullshit. Oh, right now we're 11, 12 minutes, guys. We're going to cut off and go exclusively on Rumble. So I'm going to let you know. First, I'll tell you what the stories are ahead. Okay, so if you guys move over to Rumble, we're going to talk about another round of the Twitter files was published on Friday, showing just how much Twitter and other social media platforms work to suppress speech around COVID and vaccinations. And so it's coming to light now. Obviously, it's Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, TikTok, Pinterest. We're going to get into that story, guys. So make sure you get over to the Irnieracing Rumble. Just go into Rumble and type Irnieracing. There will be a link in the description for you YouTube folks who are still on CensorTube. And another story is the U.S. says no to peace talks in Ukraine. I thought it was Ukraine that was at war, not the U.S. So what does the U.S. have to say no to peace talks for this sovereign country of Ukraine, right? Well, the United States is warning the world that it does not want a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia if it is negotiated by China. But you know what? Nobody's going... it's so funny because nobody's going to the table to do these peace talks. I mean, Russia's been there to offer peace talks, but the whole time Zelensky and the USA have been absolutely... They want this to be a war machine. As long as they can make money and control from it, it's the perpetual war machine. If you guys haven't figured this out, of all wars, this is all the USA ever does, is they like to go to all these countries and put in their puppet regimes, instigate their coups, put in their puppet actor, and continue on the war machine. So, Russian President Vladimir Putin met with the Chinese president today, followed by a meeting in Ukraine with President Zelensky. The U.S. is acting like anyone not invited to the dinner party, right? They're like, no talking. And one of the final stories we'll talk about is the indictment of Donald Trump. The anxiety is high in the U.S. on speculation that former President Trump will be arrested this week on charges related to the hush money he paid to a one-time sex partner, Stormy Daniels. And this goes to the lawyers like Michael Cohen, who is in prison for this. We're going to get into that story, guys, so make sure you get over to Rumble. And we have a few things trending as well, and we'll get into that. So, 5, go to Irnieracing Rumble in the description, or just go to Rumble, Irnieracing, look it up. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, welcome to...